Good morning and welcome to story time. Last week we left our friend Pooh in kind of a tricky situation, and Piglet was also in a bit of a bind. So we need to find out what happened to both of them. If you remember, Piglet was in his house wondering what to do all by himself because there was a flood and the water was rising up around him. Do you remember what he did? That's right. He found a bottle, he wrote a message, he wrapped it up, and put it outside his window into the water, hoping that one of his other friends would find it and rescue him. Well, that's where we left off, so that's where we'll pick up today. So, Pooh Bear was sitting in his home, in his chair, having a dream about woozles, when he suddenly woke up and looked at his window and saw the water all around him. And there's a picture of him getting up and looking and seeing what's going on outside his house. The water is rushing right in his front door. He splashed to his door and he looked out. "This is serious," said Pooh. "I must have an escape." So he took his largest pot of honey and escaped with it to a broad branch of his tree, well above the water. Of course, he brought his honey pot with him. And then he climbed down and escaped with another pot. And when the whole escape was finished, there was Pooh sitting on his branch, dangling his legs, and there beside him were 10 pots of honey. There's Pooh on the branch with his 10 pots of honey. 2 days later, there was Pooh sitting there on his branch, dangling his leg, and there beside him were only 4 pots of honey. 3 days later, there was Pooh sitting on his branch, dangling his legs, and there beside him was 1 pot of honey. So from 10 to 4 to only 1 pot of honey left. What's he going to do? 4 days later, and there was Pooh. And it was on the morning of the 4th day that Piglet's bottle came floating past him. With one loud cry of "Honey!" Pooh plunged into the water, seized the bottle, and struggled back to his tree limb. "Bother," said Pooh as he opened it. "All that wet for nothing. What's this bit of paper doing?" He took it out and looked at it. "It's a message," he said to himself. "That's what it is. And that letter is a P. So is that, and so that, and P means Pooh. So it's a very important message to me, and I can't read it. I must find Christopher Robin, or Owl, or Piglet, one of those clever readers who can read things, and they will tell me what this message means. Only I can't swim. Bother." Then he had an idea, and I think that for a bear of very little brain it was a good idea. He said to himself, "If a bottle can float, then a jar can float, and if a jar floats, I can sit on top of it. If it's a very big jar..." So he took his biggest jar and corked it up. "All boats have to have a name," he said. "So I shall call mine the Floating Bear." And with these words, he dropped his boat into the water and jumped in after it. For a little while, Pooh and the Floating Bear were uncertain as to which of them was meant to be on the top. But after trying 1 or 2 different positions, they settled down with the Floating Bear underneath, and Pooh triumphantly astride it, paddling vigorously with his feet. And there's Piglet paddling down the stream on his honey jar boat, which he called the Floating Bear. Christopher Robin lived at the very top of the forest. It rained and it rained and it rained, but the water wouldn't come up to his house. Did it rain at your house yesterday? It did at mine, and it watered my flower gardens and it watered my vegetable garden. We had some thunder and lightning here too. It was an interesting day, and I sat out on my porch and watched the storm. While Christopher Robin was watching the water coming down around him, but he was safe inside his house. It was rather jolly to look down into the valleys and see the water all around him, but it rained so hard that he stayed indoors most of the time and thought about things. Every morning he went out with his umbrella and put a stick in the place where the water came up to so he could measure it. And every next morning he went out and he couldn't see his stick anymore. So he put another stick in the place where the water came up to. And then he walked home again, and each morning he had a shorter way to walk than he had had the morning before. On the morning of the 5th day, he saw the water all around him, and he knew that for the first time in his life, he was on a real island, which was very exciting. It was on this morning that Owl came flying over the water to say, "How do you do?" to his friend Christopher Robin. "I say, Owl," said Christopher Robin, "isn't this fun? I'm on an island." "The atmospheric conditions have been very unfavorable lately," said Owl. "The what?" "It's been raining," explained Owl. "Yes," said Christopher Robin, "it has. The flood level has reached an unprecedented height." "The who?" "There's a lot of water around here," said Owl. "Yes," said Christopher Robin, "there is. However, the prospects are rapidly becoming more favorable. At any moment—" "Have you seen Pooh?" "No. At any moment." "I hope he's all right," said Christopher Robin. "I have been wondering about him. I expect Piglet's with him. Do you think they're all right, Owl?" "I expect so. You see, at any moment—" "Do go and see, Owl, because Pooh hasn't got very much brain, and he might do something silly. And I do love him so, Owl. Do you see, Owl?" "That's all right," said Owl. "I'll go back directly," and he flew off. In a little while he was back again. "Pooh isn't there," he said. "Not there?" "Has been there. He's been sitting on a branch of his tree outside his house with 9 pots of honey." "What happened to the 10th pot, do you remember?" "Yes, Pooh made it into his boat, the floating bear." "Oh, Pooh," cried Christopher Robin, "where are you?" "Here I am," said a growly voice behind him. "Pooh!" They rushed into each other's arms. "How did you get here, Pooh?" asked Christopher Robin when he was ready to talk again. "On my boat," said Pooh proudly. "I had a very important message sent in my bottle. And owing to have got some water in my eyes, I couldn't read it. So I brought it to you, on my boat." With these proud words he gave Christopher Robin the message. "But it's from Piglet," cried Christopher Robin when he read it. "Is there anything about Pooh in it?" asked the bear, looking over his shoulder. Christopher Robin read the message aloud. "Oh, those P's are for Piglet. I thought they were Pooh's. We must rescue him at once. I thought he was with you, Pooh. Owl, could you rescue him on your back?" "I don't think so," said Owl, after grave thought. "It is doubtful if the necessary dorsal muscles—" "Then would you fly to him at once and say that rescue is coming? And Pooh and I will think of a rescue and come as quick as ever we can." "Oh, don't talk, Owl. Go on quick." And still thinking of something to say, Owl flew off. "Now then, Pooh," said Christopher Robin, "where's your boat?" "I ought to say," exclaimed Pooh, as they walked down to the shore of the island, "that it isn't just an ordinary sort of boat. Sometimes it's a boat, and sometimes it's more of a accident. It all depends." "Depends on what?" "On whether I'm on the top or underneath it." "Oh, well, where is it?" "There," said Pooh, pointing proudly to the floating bear. And it wasn't what Christopher Robin expected, and the more he looked at it, the more he thought, "What a brave and clever bear Pooh Bear is." And the more Christopher Robin thought this, the more Pooh looked modestly down his nose and tried to pretend that he wasn't. But it's too small for the two of us, said Christopher Robin sadly. 3 of us with Piglet. That makes it smaller still. Oh, Pooh Bear, what shall we do? And then this bear, Pooh Bear, Winnie the Pooh, FOP, friend of Piglets, RC, Rabbit's companion, PD, Pole Discoverer, EC, and TF, Eeyore's comforter and tail finder. And in fact, Pooh himself said something so clever that Christopher Robin could only look at him with his mouth open and eyes staring, wondering if this was really the bear of very little brain whom he had known and loved for so long. We might go in your umbrella, said Pooh. We might go in your umbrella, said Pooh. We might go in your umbrella, said Pooh. For suddenly Christopher Robin saw that they might. He opened his umbrella and put it point down in the water. It floated, but wobbled, and Pooh got in. Do you think it will work? Do you think all 3, Christopher Robin, Winnie the Pooh, and Piglet, will be able to float on the upside-down umbrella boat? He was just beginning to say that it wasn't all right now, and when he found it that it was all right now, when he found it wasn't. So after a short drink, which he didn't really want, he waded back to Christopher Robin, and they both got in together, and it wobbled no longer. Now, why do you think it wobbled when only Pooh was on one side, and it didn't wobble when Pooh was on one side and Christopher Robin was on the other side? Do you remember when we were studying measurements in math class, and we had the balancing scale? Do you remember we talked about teeter-totters, when one person is on one end and the other person is on the other end? Do you think the same thing was happening with the umbrella? When they had equal weights on both sides, the umbrella balanced and didn't tip over. So that's why it worked better with both Pooh and Christopher Robin. They must have weighed just about the same amount to balance the umbrella boat. Well, they both got in, and it wobbled no longer. I shall call this boat the Brain of Pooh, said Christopher Robin, and the Brain of Pooh set sail forthwith in a southwesterly direction, revolving gracefully. There it is again. You can imagine Piglet's joy when at last the ship came in sight of him. In after years, he liked to think that he had been in very great danger during the terrible flood. But the only danger he had really been in was in the last half hour of his imprisonment, when Owl, who had just flown up, sat on a branch of his tree to comfort him and told him a very long story about an ant who had once laid a seagull's egg by mistake. And the story went on and on, rather like this sentence, until Piglet, who was listening out of his window without much hope, went to sleep quietly and naturally, slipping slowly out of the window towards the water until he was only hanging on by his toes, which at that moment, luckily, a sudden loud squawk from Owl, which was really part of the story, being of what his aunt said, woke the Piglet up and just gave him time to jerk himself back into safety and say, "How interesting. And did she?" Whew. Well, you can imagine his joy when at last he saw the good ship, the Brain of Pooh, Captain C. Robin and First Mate P. Bear, coming over the sea to rescue him. Christopher Robin and Pooh again. And that is really the end of this story. And I am very tired. After that last sentence, I think I shall stop here. I hope you enjoyed that story of our friends Winnie the Pooh, Piglet, Owl, and Christopher Robin.